April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above occupied France. The sky is crystal clear, the kind of cruel, beautiful morning where men kill each other in silence, falling like meteors through air too thin to carry their screams. Oberleutnant Rolf Hermischen adjusts his oxygen mask and smiles. Below him, 16 American fighters struggle upward, their massive silhouettes lumbering through the stratosphere like whales trying to fly. Through the canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190, he watches them with the confidence of a veteran ace, a man who has survived Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. "The Amerikaner have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmits to his wingman, laughter crackling through the radio. The Americans climbing toward him are piloting Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, 7 tons of American steel, powered by engines that sound like thunder and look like rolling barrels with wings too small and propellers too large. To German eyes, accustomed to the elegant Spitfire and the nimble Soviet Yak, these machines appear almost comical. Hermischen doesn't know it yet, but he's watching the arrival of the weapon that will destroy the Luftwaffe. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles will become the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction are already loaded in those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, 8 Browning machine guns, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. But on this April morning, none of the Americans know that yet. They're novices in an untested machine, facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, scans the sky with the eyes of a man who knows he's outmatched. He's a veteran, but of Spitfires, not Thunderbolts. He transferred from the RAF's Eagle Squadron just weeks ago, trading the nimble British fighter for this American monster. And he understands something his men don't yet grasp. Survival in the P-47 requires forgetting everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represents a radical departure from conventional fighter philosophy. While the Germans pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation created something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that uses mass, power, and firepower to rewrite the rules. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that morning are men who will become legends, future aces whose names will strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But today, they've been in combat for exactly 0 days. The story of how these men transformed their ungainly machines into instruments of terror is a story about industrial logic defeating tactical brilliance, about quantity and quality merging into overwhelming superiority, about how German laughter turned to silence as synchronized Browning machine guns spoke their devastating language at 400 yards. The P-47 Thunderbolt was born from panic. June 1940. German fighters sweep across France, and the U.S. Army Air Corps realizes with dawning horror that America has nothing that can match the Luftwaffe's best. Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, receives urgent specifications. They want a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching German performance. What Kartveli designs instead is a monster. "It will be a dinosaur," he admits to his design team, studying the blueprint spread across the table. "But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype that first flies on May 6, 1941, shocks everyone who sees it.
At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighs 65% more than its predecessor. The massive turbo-supercharger system, with its complex ducting running through the rear fuselage, gives it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably ask the same question: "This thing actually flies?" Not only does it flies like nothing else at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, maintains full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasp for air. The turbo supercharger, fed by exhaust gases, delivers sea-level performance in the stratosphere. But the learning curve is written in blood. Major Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group during training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, watches his unit lose 18 pilots and 41 aircraft between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 kills more Americans in training than Germans will in the first months of combat. It ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, dives with such enthusiasm that pilots discover compressibility, their controls freezing as shock waves form on the wings. But those who master it discover something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, who will become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, describes his first flight with wonder in his voice. "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it." The first combat encounters confirm every German prejudice. April and May 1943. The P-47s can't turn with the Focke-Wulf 190s, can't climb with the Messerschmitt 110s, can't match their nimble handling at medium altitudes. German pilots quickly develop tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below, where the heavy Thunderbolts struggle, forcing turning fights where agility matters more than firepower. Hauptmann Josef Pips Prieler, commanding officer of Jägergeschwader 26, reports to headquarters after his first encounter, with barely concealed contempt. "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indianer, fat targets pretending to be warriors." The statistics seem to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, American fighter groups lose 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggests the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots joke that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 is to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange is happening in those early encounters. Something German intelligence fails to notice. The P-47s that are shot down have absorbed incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returns from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugs off hits that would have stopped a liquid-cooled fighter cold. More significantly, when P-47s do get their guns on target, the results are catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's weapons battery creates a convergent zone of destruction that German pilots have never experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or cannon with limited ammunition, the American fighter can maintain sustained fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. But the event that will begin changing German perceptions hasn't happened yet. Not until June 26, 1943. Lieutenant R.S. Johnson, of the 61st Fighter Squadron is flying Tail End Charlie, the last aircraft in the formation, the most vulnerable position, the spot where inexperienced pilots get killed. His formation of 48 P-47s is returning from escort duty, fuel running low, when they're bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 26. The Germans execute a perfect attack, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, caught at the rear of the formation, takes catastrophic damage in the first seconds of combat. 21 20mm cannon shells explode across his aircraft. The canopy shatters. Hydraulic fluid sprays into the cockpit. The engine cowling is torn away. Fire erupts behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel, tries to bail out. The canopy is jammed. A 20mm shell has exploded in the canopy track, welding it shut. He's trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. For a moment, one terrible crystalline moment, he accepts that he's going to die, that he'll ride this burning wreck down into French soil, another name on a casualty list, another telegram to a family in Oklahoma. Then something shifts. The aircraft is still flying. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-covered windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shakes violently, and controls that respond only intermittently, Johnson manages to level the Thunderbolt and point it toward England. The P-47 continues flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then it gets worse. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 discovers the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this pilot, though several names have been proposed based on German combat reports. What follows is one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positions himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opens fire with his 4 20mm cannon and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, can only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbs the entire cannon ammunition load. The German repositions and fires again, this time with only his machine guns, the cannon ammunition exhausted. Then he pulls alongside. Johnson can see his face clearly through the shattered canopy. Young, blonde, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German stares at the flying wreck, at the shredded metal, the exposed structure, the fire still burning behind the instrument panel. He repositions and empties his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flies. The German pilot pulls alongside again, shakes his head in apparent amazement, gives an informal salute, and peels away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 crosses the channel, makes landfall over England. The engine begins failing as he approaches Manston Airfield. He lands with his last drops of fuel, the engine seizing on the runway. The crew chief stops counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Yet, the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sends shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreckage realize they've underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from Jagdgeschwader 26, initially refuses to believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirms the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver and survived.
By July 1943, American pilots are learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group commander, discovers the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially seen as a disadvantage, becomes a weapon. In a dive, nothing can catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 can reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter can achieve even in a vertical dive. This speed can be converted into altitude in a zoom climb that leaves pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who will become one of the first American aces in Europe, develops what becomes known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots call it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters can effectively operate. When Luftwaffe fighters appear below, the Thunderbolts roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that make deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns speak. German pilots who survive describe it as facing a wall of lead. The combined firepower creates an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern don't just fall, they disintegrate. August 17, 1943. The dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encounters a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack B-17s with their heavy cannon and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less maneuverable, are the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolls into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110s who survives, later recounts in a POW interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. He pauses, and in the silence you can hear the weight of what he witnessed. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s are destroyed in less than a minute. Each P-47 carries 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersect in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faces 100 half-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Grubeski, who will become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, describes the effect with clinical precision. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe is discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance improves dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffer. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintains its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, see their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet. Oberlieutenant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encounters this reality fatally on October 8, 1943.
leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen. Philipp finds his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, is gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dive on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters are sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, is flying at 31,000 feet when he spots Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report is clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sends shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both eastern and western fronts, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command orders an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report, delivered to Reichsmarschall Göring in November 1943, is sobering. The Timeless Bolt's service ceiling exceeds 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter can reach. Its dive speed approaches the sound barrier. Its armor includes 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allows it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. January 1944. A new variant begins arriving in England that will complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47 D-22 features a Hamilton Standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades, 13 feet in diameter, with broad chord blades that bite into the air like massive oars. The improvement in climb rate is immediate and dramatic.
Where earlier Thunderbolts climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. Hauptmann Heinz Knocke of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encounters the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He writes in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we left at last year." The paddle blade propeller does more than improve performance. It changes the sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds can be heard from miles away. German ground troops report being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. A deep, threatening rumble that means death from above. They begin calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks can escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carries 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending range to over 1,000 miles. The Luftwaffe's response is to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict enough losses to stop the American daylight campaign. But this requires flying through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. Major Gunther Roll, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survives an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that leaves him badly wounded. He recalls in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris.
Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. The escort missions reveal another P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters operated maximum power settings that consume fuel rapidly, the big American radios can cruise efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts can remain with the bombers for hours, rotating top cover while maintaining enough fuel for combat and return. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived to take over long-range escort duties in spring 1944, P-47 units increasingly focus on ground attack, a role that will make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition begins in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepare for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proves equally effective against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition can penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire can destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst puts 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But it's the addition of bombs and rockets that transforms the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant can carry 2,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants add zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experiences P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They called them jabos, fighter bombers, but these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. June 6, 1944. Over 500 P-47s provide air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones are massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reports, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our Gruppe. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain."
In the weeks following D-Day, P-47 systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics are staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claim 651 locomotives destroyed, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht is forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. The Germans try everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforce vehicle armor, deploy more anti-aircraft guns, develop new camouflage techniques. Nothing works. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower makes them nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak gun struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, the P-47 is simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovers that the Thunderbolt's qualities are perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, develops tactics specifically for the Pacific. On October 11, 1943, Kirby leads 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 enemy planes himself in a single mission. He earns the Medal of Honor.
The Japanese, accustomed to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters, are unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Tsuburo Sakai, who encounters P-47s over New Guinea, later writes, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart." The P-47N, developed specifically for the Pacific, features increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending range to 2,350 miles. This variant will escort B-29s to Japan, proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 has evolved into a true long-range weapon. By war's end, the P-47 Thunderbolt has flown more missions than any other American fighter, 546,000 combat sorties. It has destroyed more enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat than any other Allied fighter in the European theater. It has delivered more ordnance than any other fighter bomber. The numbers tell part of the story. 3,752 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 railway cars, 68,000 trucks, 6,000 armored vehicles. But numbers don't capture the psychological impact, the terror German soldiers felt when they heard that distinctive thunder growing in the sky, the despair Luftwaffe pilots experienced watching their formations dissolve under concentrated American firepower, the profound shift in aerial warfare doctrine that the P-47 represented. Robert Johnson survived the war with 27 victories. He returned to Oklahoma, married, raised a family, but he never forgot June 26, 1943, the day a German pilot emptied his guns into Johnson's aircraft and then saluted him before flying away. In 1992, he attended a Luftwaffe veterans reunion in Germany, hoping to find the pilot who had spared him. He never did. Some mysteries remain unsolved. Some debts can never be repaid. Major Hubert Zemke, the man who transformed the 56th Fighter Group from novices into the highest-scoring American fighter group in Europe, was shot down in October 1944 when his P-47 broke apart in a thunderstorm. He spent the rest of the war as a POW. Colonel Neil Kirby, who had earned the Medal of Honor for his incredible combat performance over Wewak, was shot down and killed by Japanese fighters on March 5, 1944. He was 33 years old. The P-47 the German pilots had laughed at in April 1943, the flying milk bottle, the pregnant cow, the Indianer, had become the instrument of Luftwaffe destruction. It proved that air superiority wasn't just about turning radius or climb rate. It was about engineering, industrial capacity, firepower, and the ability to bring overwhelming force to bear. The Thunderbolt represented American industrial might made manifest, a weapon system that could absorb punishment, deliver devastating firepower, and be produced in quantities that rendered German tactical excellence irrelevant. By 1945, Republic Aviation had built 15,686 Thunderbolts. Each one carried the same message: the sky belongs to us now. Today, fewer than 10 P-47 Thunderbolts remain airworthy worldwide. They appear at air shows, throaty radial engines still producing that distinctive thunder, paddle blade propellers still clawing at the air. Crowds gather to watch them fly, these massive, beautiful dinosaurs that once ruled the skies over Europe and the Pacific. When they pass overhead, you can feel the sound in your chest. Donnerslag, thunder. The old men who flew them are almost all gone now. Robert Johnson passed away in 1998. The last American P-47 Ace died in 2018. But the aircraft remain, testament to the men who mastered them, the engineers who built them, and the turning point they represented in aerial warfare. When German pilots first saw the P-47 struggling for altitude on that April morning in 1943, they laughed. They didn't laugh for long. Because sometimes the weapon that looks ungainly, outdated, impossible, sometimes that weapon changes everything. Sometimes the dinosaur wins. If this story moved you, if it made you remember the courage of men who climbed into these machines knowing they might not return, the innovation that turned mockery into mastery, the price of the freedom we inherit, subscribe and help us keep their legacy alive. The names deserve to be remembered. The thunder should never be forgotten.